Before we got Acidel, and remember, I have to leave promptly at a quarter of to get to my idiotic medical appointment on time. But before we start talking about Acidel, does anybody have any final questions or comments about Williams altogether?
I had to listen to the last session we had online, and it was really helpful, the comments you made about the triadic verse being like waves rolling in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I have a sort of a linear mind sometimes, and I'm saying, what? So anyway, that was very helpful.
Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, it really works like that. And especially in a poem like Asphodel, which is very much a thought process and a feeling process, and it does not completely follow in a linear fashion. Sometimes Williams will go off on a tangent and so on. But in general, I think if you just kind of relax and read the poem, and trace the pattern of feeling that runs through it, Williams is greatly interested in pattern in this poem. He's greatly interested in the imagination and art. And as with all the late poems, he's thinking a lot about death. He's thinking a lot about imminent death. And also, as he says, the death of love, the death of the imagination. He's writing this during the early 50s, that is to say, during the early nuclear age. And he's greatly concerned with what the quote, the bomb means for human consciousness, not just the fact of the bomb, but everything that the bomb represents. And that's very much the subject of the second part of this poem. So to just kind of finish a little bit talking about the first part of the poem, we talked last time about the um, kind of the binary that Williams is setting up in this poem between the garden and the sea, and the way that the garden represents the hortus conclusus. Is that how you say it? The hortus
Yes.
conclusus, the enclosed garden, the safe place of beauty and flowering, which is also the place of, the home, the marriage, with its wall around it. And then Williams says, but the sea is also a garden. And Williams, anytime he starts talking about the garden, only the garden, then he's reminded of the wildness of the sea, the openness, the expansiveness, and also the way he associates the sea with sexual passion, with adultery, with, boundlessness, which he feels is absolutely essential for his life as an artist. And this is really the primary conflict in Williams's life, I think, as a human being. He had a really crazy woman in his life, not a lover, but this crazy woman named the Baroness Elsa von Freytag Loringhaven, who was part of the scene in New York City during the very avant-garde 1920s and so on. And she fascinated Williams. She was crazy, like knockout crazy. She wore a muumuu with cutouts, and she wore a coal scuttle on her head and tromped around the streets of New York. And she fancied herself an artist and so on. But she fascinated him. At one point, she came out to Rutherford and knocked on the door and confronted him. And she wrote this thing, which is why I'm mentioning. She wrote this sort of diatribe against Williams called "The I Call Hamlet of Wedding Ring," which is a crazy title. "The I Call Hamlet of Wedding Ring," and she's pointing to something real about Williams, which is his ambivalence about marriage. That, as we said last time, marriage is the rock, and Flossie is the rock upon which everything is built. Marriage is that initial contract with the world, and Williams felt without that, he would be, in a sense, spinning through the void. He would be falling into the abyss without this initial lifelong contract with the world, which was not only his marriage with Flossie, but everything that represented as far as having a ground, having roots, having commitments to a community. But then at the same time, he felt, um, and I think this is a pretty justifiable human struggle, that in order to stay alive, in order to stay creative, he had to keep some open-endedness in his life. He had to keep some susceptibility to being, swayed by passion of different kinds in his life. And so this really is it's what ends up when he's at this asylum in the early 50s, when he has a really complete mental breakdown for several weeks. And this is the time during which, when Flossie would come to visit him, he would confess. He would, take her through the whole kind of litany of his extramarital relationships to her infinite pain and his infinite pain. But he felt that he really needed to um, get down to the bottom and then start over with Flossie and reaffirm his love for her, which is what this poem is all about. So those are the two great kind of terms of the first part of the poem, the garden and the sea. And he talks about, flowers, how much they both loved flowers, and how he learned that there are flowers that grow also in hell. And this, of course, is the significance of the symbol asphodel, the flower that grows in the Elysian fields, the flower that grows in hell, as well as on the mountainsides of the Alps, and that is associated with the torch, with a torch, with a beacon, with Persephone, and Persephone, of course, who is Cora, is the goddess who goes to hell, who becomes the bride of death, but then also comes back every springtime to the earth to rejuvenate and replenish the earth. So these are central symbols for Williams. And then this modulates into the larger binary between death and life, and the larger binary between the death of the imagination and the fertility of the imagination, which is to say, poetry, pattern, beauty, affirmation. So these are this is the territory that this poem is exploring, and it explores it in a really loose and fluid fashion. So we talked some about the beginning of Acidow. And then he starts talking about marriage when he says, there had come to me a challenge, your dear self, mortal as I was, the lily's throat to the hummingbird. Endless wealth, I thought, held out its arms to me, 1,000 topics in an apple blossom. The generous earth itself gave us leaf. The whole world became my garden. But but the sea, which no one tends, is also a garden when the sun strikes it and the waves are wakened. I have seen it, and so have you, when it puts all flowers to shame. Um, and then he goes on a little bit later. I cannot say that I have gone to hell for your love, but often found myself there in your pursuit. So this imagery, again, I mean, that's kind of a joke, like, yeah, life is really hell sometimes, but it's also the imagery of um, Orpheus and Eurydice, but also the image of Cora, who is the goddess of hell, the maiden of hell, who then returns to the earth. I do not like it and wanted to be in heaven. Hear me out. So I'm going to skip some of part one because I think that you can follow it. And then he starts talking about the Iliad and quote Helen's public fault. It's not just Helen's public fault, of course, but he says, were it not for that, there would have been no poem but the world. If we had remembered these crimson petals spilled among the stones, would have called it simply murder. The sea alone, with its multiplicity, holds any hope. And then he says, the storm, i.e., his stroke, the end of the world, the storm that comes in over the ocean, the storm has proven abortive, but we remain after the thoughts it roused to re-cement our lives. It is the mind that must be cured, short of death's intervention, and the will becomes again a garden. The poem is complex, and the place made in our lives for the poem. And he's talking about Helen. All women are not Helen, I know that, but have Helen in their hearts. My sweet, you have it also. Therefore, I love you and could not love you otherwise. And then I want to just read, he talks, really beautiful description of Flossie, of how he viewed her. He says, the storm bursts or fades. It is not the end of the world. Love is something else, or so I thought it, a garden which expands, though I knew you as a woman and never thought otherwise until the whole sea has been taken up and all its gardens. It was the love, the love that swallows up all else, a grateful love, a love of nature, of people, animals, a love engendering gentleness and goodness that moved me, and that I saw in you. So it's a beautiful tribute to her. But then immediately the kind of I should have known, though I did not, that the lily of the valley is a flower makes many ill who whiff it. And that's a dig. That's a kind of a slam. It's hard to interpret what he means, but there's something about her sweetness. There's something about her, quote, fragrance that is also off-putting, you know? So there's ambivalence again. But now I'm going to read you the end, this really famous end of part one, which poets love to quote. It's like you can find it all over the place. Of asphodel, that greeny flower, I come, my sweet, to sing to you. My heart rouses, thinking to bring you news of something that concerns you and concerns many men. Look at what passes for the new. You will not find it there, but in despised poems. It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. Hear me out, for I too am concerned, and every man who wants to die at peace in his bed besides. So super famous lines. It is difficult to get the news from poems. Echoing Thoreau, of course, who talks about the news in Walden, and he says, what news? He says, that is new, which was never old. And this is what Williams is talking about here, not just the newspaper news, not just the news of the bomb, not just the news of the Cold War, not just the news of McCarthy, but the news that comes from poems, the news which is never old. Men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. Section two is thinking about the nature of the early 1950s, thinking about history. And William says at the beginning, if we are to understand our time, we must find the key to it, not in the 18th and 19th centuries, but in earlier, wilder, and darker epochs. That's interestingly something that T.S. Eliot also says, that we have to turn back to far earlier epochs to get a sense of the roots of our civilization, the roots of our culture, not just look back to, like, the Romantic era or even the 18th century, but earlier, darker, wilder epochs. So to know what I have to know about my own death, if it be real, I have to take it apart. And then he starts talking a lot about art, about Cezanne. Williams loved Cezanne a lot. He said, Cezanne rolled the stone away from the tomb, which is an interesting statement. He means essentially Cezanne allows us to see the things of the world, like the apples, for instance, just exactly for what they are, for the appliness of the apple, which is, of course, something that Williams himself does in his poetry. Not that they symbolize something else, not that they're Eve's apples, not that they symbolize original sin, but that the apple is appley, that the apple has heft and weight and beauty in time and space in and of itself. And then he talks about moments in life that would be these also equally moments when you you observe or you are in the presence of what Williams calls beautiful thing, capital B, capital T, which is something that just strikes upon you for its beauty, for its, you're not looking for it, but it seems to leap free from the ordinary concerns of time and space, something that just strikes upon you. And he talks about waiting 4 days to see the Jungfrau, which of course is the young maiden, which is Cora again, or Persephone, the goddess. Um, Rain had fallen steadily, and then a waitress says, look, 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 and there it is in the distance, covered with new fallen snow. And then he talks about being at Granada, climbing the Alhambra, and having just this lovely moment with the little boys running around him and the gypsy woman. I could speak little Spanish. They directed me, guided by a young girl, on my way. Again, the goddess appears out of nowhere, guides him on his way. And this is not, like, oh, wow, this is a thing. No, this is like just somebody real who strikes him uh, as what individual, as lovely, um, and as a kind of a chance encounter. Those were the pinnacles. The deaths I suffered began in the heads about me. My eyes were too keen not to see through the world's niggardliness, right? It says, I was lost, failing the poem. And then going on a little bit, he says, I am reminded that the bomb puts an end to all that. The bomb puts an end to all poems, puts an end to all flowers, puts an end to all pattern, puts an end to all imagination, except the imagination which is dedicated to death. I am reminded that the bomb also is a flower dedicated, howbeit, to our destruction. The mere picture of the exploding bomb fascinates us, so that we cannot wait to prostrate ourselves before it. We do not believe that love can so wreck our lives. The end will come in its time. Meanwhile, we are sick to death of the bomb and its childlike insistence. Death is no answer, no answer to a blind old man whose bones have the movement of the sea, a sexless old man for whom it is a sea of which his verses are made up. And of course, he's thinking about Homer there as well. Homer, the blind old man whose verses are the verses of the sea. And he's thinking about himself, not blind literally, but old, sexless, really, really frail, and still creating poetry, which is, in a sense, the song of the sea. There is no power so great as love, which is a sea, which is a garden, as enduring as the verses of that blind old man destined to live forever. Few men believe that. And then I think this is so beautiful, nor in the games of children. So I didn't show you, but if you look at pictures from Bruegel that we talked about last time, there's a really lovely three-part poem called Children's Games. And what he's doing there is he's looking at one of the paintings, the Bruegel paintings, which is like all these kids playing games, just crowded field. And it's like people have identified more than something like 70 different games that the kids are playing, you know? But at the same time, he's also writing about the fact that kids still play the same games. Kids still play, hopscotch and hoops and jacks and, acrobatic stunts and races, Red Rover, stuff like that. It's like it's all there. It's like it's lasting. It's sempiternal, And this beautiful connection of the games of children through time, through the centuries, through time. Few men believe that, nor in the games of children. Williams is somebody who believes in the games of children. They believe rather in the bomb and shall die by the bomb. And then he talks about Darwin and Columbus. And Williams felt that Columbus, in Columbus's diaries back to the king and queen, he uses the phrase beautiful thing. He says, during that time, I walked among the trees, which was the most beautiful thing that I had ever seen. And Williams seizes that phrase, beautiful thing. And for Williams, that's like this token, this talisman for the whole rest of his poetic life, beautiful thing. Williams is not thinking about Columbus the way we think about, the Native Americans and so on. He's thinking about that Columbus discovered something which struck him with its beauty, which promptly led to the whole history of colonization and expropriation and Columbus's own defeat and violence and all the rest of it. He says, due to the world's avarice, this ended so disastrously. How the world opened its eyes, how bitter a disappointment. And then he talks about the measure. He says, the measure has been lost and we suffer for it. We come to our deaths in silence. So it's not that we're not going to come to our deaths. We're not going to live forever, but we lose a sense of measure. We lose a sense of beauty and appropriateness and, dedication to life rather than to death. So Williams is really kind of um, putting his finger, putting his fingers in the wound of contemporary civilization and of our hunger for destruction. It's like we get off on it, you know? And he says, he's talking to Flossie, in contrast, have cherished certain paintings. We have, loved art. I have saved babies' lives. But the words made solely of air or less that came to me out of the air and insisted on being written down. I regret most that there has come an end to them. For in spite of it all that I have brought on myself grew that single image that I adore equally with you. And so it brought us together. So it's not literally true that the words have come to an end because he's still in the process of writing this poem, but he understands that it's really close to the end of his writing life. And he's, sad about it, right? Book three is it's like the Scala, it's mounting the stairs toward Flossie's forgiveness of him. And he's trying to explain himself to her. He's trying to explain some stuff about masculinity to her and masculine sexuality. And he says, what power has love but forgiveness? In other words, by its intervention, what has been done can be undone. What good is it otherwise? So he's asking her to forgive him. He says, it is ridiculous what airs we put on to seem profound while our hearts gasp, dying for want of love. And he's really talking about himself there. Having your love, I was rich. Thinking to have lost it, I am tortured and cannot rest. I do not come to you abjectly with confessions of my faults. I have confessed all of them. In the name of love, I come proudly as to an equal to be forgiven. Let me, for I know you take it hard with good reason, give the steps, if it may be, by which you shall mount again to think well of me. So this is it's a little mixed. It's like on the one hand, he's really sincere about wanting forgiveness. And on the other hand, at one point, the part that makes me really pissed off is like, we got to forgive these women who helped me sin against you. And I'm like, oh, come on. But that's a little bit later. I'm like, yeah, right. Gag me with a spoon. But step one, the statue of Colleani's horse with the thick-set little man on top in armor, presenting a naked sword, comes persistently to my mind. Pictures of crude force, sexuality as crude force. And then this really interesting anecdote with his gay friend, the closeted gay painter Marsden Hartley. Williams owned Marsden Hartley's paintings. They were good friends. He says, once at night, waiting at a station with a friend, a fast freight thundered through, kicking up the dust. My friend, a distinguished artist, turned with me to protect his eyes. That's what we'd all like to be, Bill, he said. I smiled, knowing how deeply he meant it. So that's stage one, just sheer sexual power. The horse, the roused horse, the statue with a sword, the thundering train. Stage two, a lot more subtle and a lot more mysterious. He says, I saw another man yesterday in the subway. I was on my way uptown to a meeting. He kept looking at me and I at him. And this man is, it's like sometimes you'll be someplace and you'll notice a person and you become intrigued with that person, fascinated with that person, but you don't know why. And you just keep looking at that person and that person is looking at you and there's some kind of bond there, some kind of meaning or message, and you don't know what it is. It's nothing overtly stated. He describes the man, and the man is a kind of father figure. He says, this is a man, not wealthy at all, wearing a heavy and very dirty undershirt, wearing striped trousers, nice shoes, although worn but recently polished, socks falling down around his ankles, a gold fountain pen and a mechanical pencil, and an odd sort of jumble of images. And then this worn leather zipper case bulging with its contents lay between his ankles on the floor, which is like a fertility image, a sack of secrets. And you have no idea what's in that, but it's scrotal somehow. Then I remembered when my father was a young man, it came to me from an old photograph. He wore such a beard. This man reminds me of my father. So it's like he's in the presence of his father, but also of all father-ishness. Speak to him, I cried. He will know the secret. He was gone, and I did nothing about it. With him were all men, and all women too were in his loins. So it's as if turning back to earlier times, as he said we must do, is as if he comes back to some kind of or figure, some kind of archetypal father figure. And he almost can speak to him and say, "What's the secret? What's the secret?" Well, like, secret about what? Who knows? But then the man is gone. Fanciful or not, it seemed to me a flower whose savor had been lost. And then he says, and so by chance, how should it be otherwise from what came to me in a subway train? I build a picture of all men. And then he turns really beautifully to talk directly to Flossie. It is winter, and there waiting for you to care for them are your plants. Poor things, you say, as you compassionately pour at their roots the reviving water. Lean cheeked, I say to myself, kindness moves her. Shall she not be kind also to me? At this, courage possessed me finally to go on. Sweet, creep into my arms. I spoke hurriedly in the spell of some wry impulse when I boasted that there was any pride left in me. Do not believe it. And then again, this unless. In a special way, a way I shrink to speak of, I am proud. After that manner, I call on you, as I do on myself, the same, to forgive all women who have offended you. I'm sorry, that just makes me mad. That just makes me really mad. But I think, what he wants not to do is just grovel. He's still got his pride, and he's trying to establish a kind of equal footing with Flossie. So it can't just be like, whip me, chain me, I'm down, I'm nasty, I'm horrible. It's got to be, there is a kind of pride in me. He said, is the artist failing to seek and to yield such forgiveness that will cure us both? Let us keep it to ourselves, but trust it. And then he goes on more, um, talking about memories of the flowers that they, had in their youth, the beautiful daisies, their spicy, sweet odor. There are many other flowers I could recall for your pleasure. I mean, they both really loved flowers. And it's true that in the olden days or in simpler times, flowers actually smelled. Sometimes they still do, but like some years ago, I had a residency for a month in a little village in France, about 2 hours south of Paris. And I swear to God, if you walked in the streets, you could smell the flowers. You weren't leaning over to smell them. The air smelled of flowers. The air smelled of carnations and roses and lilies. And that's just the air. So I was thinking of 19th century novels where they say, she walked among the lanes which were so perfumed with blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, good Lord, that actually is true. So he says, you have forgiven me, making me new again, so that here, in the place dedicated to the imagination, to memory of the dead, I bring you a last flower. Don't think that because I say this in a poem, it can be treated lightly, or that the facts will not uphold it. Are facts not flowers, and flowers facts, or poems flowers, or all works of the imagination interchangeable? Which proves that love rules them all, for then you will be my queen of love forevermore. This is a sublime jump that he's making here. You can trace out the logic. Facts are flowers if they flower. Flowers are facts. Poems are flowers. Poems are facts. Facts are poems. And then this great leap, which proves that love rules them all, which proves that everything in the world is like Dylan Thomas's force that through the green fuse drives the flower. Everything is, as William says, impelled by love, you know? Now, I just want to read you the last section because I think it is so incredibly beautiful. But but first of all, does anybody have any like really, really quick questions or comments? Yeah, go.
I just remember I grew up in Rochester, New York, and fairly near where I grew up, the house where I grew up was a place called Highland Park, and it had, I don't know, something like 100 acres of lilacs.
Oh God.
And every year, right around Mother's Day, they'd had the Lilac Festival, and that
Oh,
whole section of the city smelled like lilacs. It was great.
I love lilacs so much. I just love them. Leslie, were you wanting to say something?
Yeah, I just thought it was sort of ironic that he said don't think that because I say this in a poem, it can be treated lightly or that the facts will not uphold it. Because it seems as if it makes it sound like, well, poems are insincere things. You just say things in poems and they aren't true. I mean, I would think he would think that poems were sort of sacred things and that if you said it in a poem, it should be at its foundation really, really true. So I thought that was an interesting, not what I was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, he does think that, but so many people, including 1.5 billion students that I've taught, is like, oh, poems, what do they have to do with reality? You
Yeah,
know?
I think if you care about truth in poetry, you feel more of a hostility toward poems that are pretty lies and, meant only as pretty lies than if you didn't care about poetry at all.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna read you I love the coda. It's so beautiful, I think. Inseparable from the fire, its light takes precedence over it. Then follows what we have dreaded, but it can never overcome what has gone before. In the huge gap between the flash and the thunderstroke, spring has come in, or deep snow fallen. Call it old age. In that stretch, we have lived to see a colt kick up its heels. Do not hasten. Laugh and play in an eternity. The heat will not overtake the light. That gelds the bomb, permitting that the mind contain it. This is that interval, that sweetest interval when love will blossom, come early, come late, and give itself to the lover. Only the imagination is real. I have declared it time without end. If a man die, it is because death has first possessed his imagination. But if he refuse death, no greater evil can befall him, unless it be the death of love meet him in full career. And indeed, for him, the light has gone out. But love and the imagination are of a piece, swift as the light to avoid destruction. So we come to watch time's flight as we might watch summer lightning or fireflies, secure by grace of the imagination, safe in its care. For if the light itself has escaped, the whole edifice opposed to it goes down. Light, the imagination, and love in our age by natural law, which we worship, maintain all of the peace, their dominance. So let us love, confident as is the light in its struggle with darkness, that there is as much to say and more for the one side, and that not the darker, which John Donne, for instance, among many men presents to us. In the controversy touching the younger and the older Tolstoy, Villon, St. Anthony, Kung, Rimbaud, Buddha, and Abraham Lincoln, the palm goes always to the light. Who may shall advance the light, call it what you may. The light for all time shall outspeed the thundercrack. Medieval pageantry is human, and we enjoy the rumor of it, as in our world we enjoy the reading of Chaucer, likewise a priest's raiment, or that of a savage chieftain. It is all a celebration of the light. All the pomp and ceremony of weddings, sweet Thames run softly till I end my song, are of an equal sort. For our wedding too, the light was wakened and shone. The light, the light stood before us waiting. I thought the world stood still. At the altar, so intent was I before my vows, so moved by your presence, a girl so pale and ready to faint, that I pitied and wanted to protect you. As I think of it now after a lifetime, it is as if a sweet scented flower were poised and for me did open. Asphodel has no odor save to the imagination, but it too celebrates the light. It is late, but an odor as from our wedding has revived for me and begun again to penetrate into all crevices of my world. So we've got 6 minutes to talk. Any comments?
Well, I thought this was a really powerful poem. I mean, a confessional poem. Definitely felt like someone kind of trying to sum up his life and what is important to him. A lot about, what it is to be an artist, which is to be in a world of beauty and things beautiful while the outside world may not mirror that. And he talks about, he talks about the Rosenbergs, he talks about the bomb. He's very, I mean, it's the only poem I think of his that we've read that is in slightest bit political.
Yeah.
And I think it's clearly, he's at this point near death, trying to sum up everything and try to reconcile his love of beauty and what he's dedicated his life to what he sees in the world around him. And
Yeah.
it's poignant, a very poignant poem.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. Any other comments, Tony?
Uh, all I was going to do was reflect what Doug said on was it lilacs? When I was back east, one spring, the air filled with the perfume of blooms, and it didn't happen. I was only there 3 years, and it didn't happen every year, but I'd never experienced anything like that before,
Yeah.
being from San Diego, and I don't think it happens every year because it happened that year that everything, you know how winter sometimes ends kind of sporadically. There'll be a little bit of spring and then winter again, and then this winter everything ended at the same, like seemingly
Yeah.
on the same day, and so everything bloomed, and I did smell all those perfumes at the same time. I don't want to go on about that, but so I've experienced that too. It was quite magical.
Yeah, it's spectacular. Anybody else want to talk? Got 4 minutes. I'm
Well,
gonna
I
send
just,
in Marianne more poems. Yeah, Neil?
yeah. No, I was just going to echo what Barry said, is that there's a lot of images in here that never showed up before. Not only he never talked, as you said, he never talked political, never talked, I mean, the idea that you did bring in the bomb or any of those sort of just antithetical to anything he'd written before. All he was on people and the surroundings and stuff like that, and tended to be, I don't know, more confined, more hard, concrete. So, but this is real interesting where he's really struggling with all this.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know if that's right or not, but
Yeah.
It seemed kind of, or it seems kind of futile to me to try to have a great summation of your life. It's doomed to failure because life is just so intensely beyond anything that you could capture, even in a poem, even for a great poet. So I didn't feel quite as Barry did. I felt like it felt shy of what a full life is. That I kept having that feeling. It's more than this.
Oh yeah, life is more than this. I mean, you'd have to read everything Williams wrote, good, bad, and indifferent, to get a sense of what his life was like, But this is from the book. The book is called Journey to Love. And it's included in Pictures from Bruegel, Pictures of Bruegel, and other poems. So the whole short book is called Journey to Love. And this is a poem which is enacting a journey to love. Leslie.
I was thinking about how this sort of sweeps back and forth between a really personal conversation that he's having with his wife and these references to very specific political things, historical things, whatever. You feel like he knows, Bossy knows what those mean to both of them. It's a shared, as husband and wife have, they have a certain words or phrases they could say, and the whole history of what that
Yeah.
means to them. And then it sweeps back the other direction, and he's turning it into more universal statements. that he would think somebody else reading the poem, that he can make a more generalized
Mhm.
comment about humankind and say adultery or whatever. So I just thought that was interesting that as I was reading it, I was hearing a very personal conversation with somebody who knows you deeply, as well as these generalizations.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. Well, guys, I gotta go to my rheumatologist. What do you know? So look for some Miriam Moore poems, and we're gonna meet next. What's today? Tuesday. We're gonna meet Thursday. You guys have to tell me if you want to meet on the 23rd, or if you want to wait till after Christmas. And you can be thinking about that.
Okay, but we'll meet Thursday.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
Thursday.
I'm gonna be in Connecticut on Thursday, but I will listen to the replay.
Okay. 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 See you guys.
All
Miriam
right,
Moore,
guys.
here we come. Bye.
Bye.
Nice to see you.
You too.